Hey, YouTube, Marshall and Sagar here. We've got a great episode today. Sagar and I are speaking with Sri Ram Krishnan and Arti Ramamurthy of the Good Time Show. You know, Sagar is in DC, in Austin, Texas. So it's always great to get the chance to talk with builders and investors out in the Bay Area. We're hunting everything relevant: AI, crypto, future of social media, ChatGPT 3, what that means for media companies, all that great stuff. I know you're going to have a blast with this episode. It's a bit lighter than the typical interview style. And we definitely hope to do more of these in the future. Hope you all enjoy and let us know what you think in the comments.
Arti and Sriram, welcome to the Realignment.
Thank you for having us. Long time callers, listeners. Always kind of wanted to, see like Sagar like after dark, right? We always see him in his suit, daylight saving time hating, European coffee hating persona. And I kind of wanted to see the darker side of Sagar. And Marshall, big fan of yours, less big fan of Sagar, but here we are.
It's okay. I don't take it personally. I'm glad to see you guys on the show.
I feel like we made it. We are officially here. We've made it. We made it to the realignment.
I was looking, you folks had so many amazing episodes, right? So the goal for this is to crush all of your previous guests. So, Zihan, my boss, Mark Andreessen, right? Some of these folks, like we need to beat that view count. So that's the goal coming after you, Mark.
All right, let's do it.
Of course. So let's just kick off by setting the stage for something that every single listener is going to identify with. It really feels like we're unironically at the end of something in Silicon Valley. Every other week, there's a tweet about how Uber sucks now. Airbnb is a disaster. I love hotels again, personally. There's obviously a lot of drama about social, just to put aside Twitter for a second, there's drama are we in the end of the social media era? Blah, goes on forever. I would love to hear from the two of you. What is your read of Silicon Valley from within Silicon Valley right now? Also, SF may be back. Someone just told me this 2 days ago. They're like, oh, by the way, SF is cool again. So it's just so difficult to keep track of all the narratives. Where are you guys at?
We have no idea if SF is back or not because we basically live in our this square few blocks, and we have two small kids, and so our entire life revolves around this very suburban part of SF with strollers, and that's our world. We are not cool people. And so we don't know the downtown. We used to live there long time ago, but we're not there anymore. So we have no idea. We go to the same restaurants, we eat the same food. It's all the same kind of
We don't get out much. We live in this black cube over here. I think there are 2, 3, 4 narratives to parse. I think one narrative is COVID, everything that happened, and is there a rebound post-COVID? And I said that's one narrative. Second, maybe more interesting narrative is the zero interest rate phenomenon and the bull market and the downstream effects of that and what happened here. But maybe the most fun one to start off with is the landscape of social media, because that seems to be dramatically changed. So I think 4 years ago, let's kind of maybe go into reverse order. So 4 years ago, for folks who may not know this, I spent pretty much most of my professional career working on social media companies. I was a nerdy Thanos collecting the Infinity Gauntlet of social media companies. I collected Facebook, I collected Snapchat, I collected Twitter twice, and I've been around the block. Haven't worked for TikTok yet, and I think by 2016, 2017, there was a thesis that social media is dead. The number of apps that you install on your phone are going to end. It's going to be Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, Snap, and that's it. We couldn't have been more wrong when we thought that, because a few things want to happen. One is the original era of social media was you post content and we give you eyeballs. That was the deal. That was a compact, right? Then people are like, wait a minute, I'm making a living. I mean, folks like you folks, like Sagar, Crystal, you creators, right? We're like, hey, we are making a living from this. We're going to professional creators. And the compact changed. It changed the adult world with OnlyFans. It changed the celebrities with Cameo. And all of a sudden, the rise of creators meant that you had these people who had huge followings and influence who could now ask social media companies, hey, I just want views and followers. I need to make a business. I have real power here. So that one different dynamic. Second, we were so wrong that, all historically, every 50 years, somebody says, all innovation is dead. Science has invented everything. Well, turns out we were also wrong about that, because after 2016, what happened? ByteDance bought Musical.ly, infused all the AI. depending on who you talk to, infuse a bunch of influence from China, but it blew up, right? And for a bunch of interesting, actually very solid product and technology reasons you can maybe go into. So that happened. And then, that intersected with all the political stuff that you folks have covered, on all of your shows. And it turns out, well, social media can really influence the politics of a country and of Western civilization. And who actually controls these social media companies became a very interesting topic, which I think in turn has led to, just kind of wrap on the social media side, what I spend a lot of my time on, which is Web3 and crypto, and what does it mean for decentralized social media, right? And of course, with a certain, extremely well-known founder buying Twitter, kind of tying it. So that's just on the social media side. On the zero-rate phenomenon, there's been a bull market for many years. Cost of capital is low. A lot of people could go out, raise money, whether it's for a startup, whether it's for a VC fund, across the board. You had a bunch of folks that are extremely well capitalized. And then for a bunch of reasons, I think which you folks have gone to, that stopped, right? Capital is hard to come by. So now you're seeing all these downstream phenomena, right? Like, so on the big tech side, we have friends who spent 15 years working at Google, working up the ranks, who thought that's why they were going to retire, who now suddenly out of a job. And their hearts go out to them. But you have a lot of people who are like, wait a minute, my job isn't safe at big tech. Nobody's hiring anymore. And the big tech execs like, well, maybe we can run things differently. Maybe we can run things a lot less people. Maybe we can be more hardcore, less focused on some of the culture wars. That's a whole set of things to pack. On the startup side, again, I spend a lot of time, and it's like a lot of people, a lot of money, but often not enough product market fit, and it's hard to raise new money. So there's a bunch of stuff going on in there, which are all intersecting together.
Arthi, you want to dig into any of that?
I think, Marshall, when you started talking about some Silicon Valley social media, it wasn't like social media lens. I think Shriram's covered. I look at all these other companies, you talked about Airbnb and Uber and all of these folks. I don't know. I feel like I'm still bullish on a lot of them. I still think this is a time, like Silicon Valley is always about a bunch of, these hooligans who didn't really fit into the scene anywhere else in the country. We couldn't get well dressed and get actual jobs. You show up here and you start a company and you kind of eat ramen and work in a garage and you build something. And I think that promise hasn't quite changed. You still see a lot of builders just, cranking away. Last week I spoke to a bunch of companies that are going to be in the next batch of Y Combinator. And I still that is the reason why we are here. And that is kind of the dream that we still believe in. So yes, these companies will they'll have these these moments of crisis and distress and these highs of success, but that ultimate builders come here and build things hasn't quite changed yet.
I think just what I would add on to what Arthi said is that it feels like genuinely things are changing and nobody knows what's going to happen. GPT, large LLMs could upturn all of capitalism. Right? Definitely a lot of technology.
Yeah.
Right? Crypto could upturn how big social media companies and other companies are run and maybe our financial systems. And so there are so many things in flux. So, we might be at the, a minor Austrian prince was shot and what's going to happen next era of technology.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Maybe without a lot of all the bad stuff happen.
And Sagar, before I jack your spot, I just want to clarify real quick on Arti's point. I totally agree. This isn't a bear case against Uber or Airbnb. I guess kind of mean that when I think of narratives, right? Because we're East Coast people, we think of things in narratives. I think of the narrative as being, it's 2008. There's now an iPhone. There are these legacy incumbent businesses. And the opportunity is to introduce tech, quote unquote, to introduce mobile computing, and that will solve this problem that you're experiencing with bad hotels, terrible taxi companies. And it seems like we've eaten, to steal from Tyler Cowen, a lot of the low-hanging fruit of what the issues were with taxis and hotels. So the next tasks for builders are going to be, how do you address cleaning fees? That next end, where actually it turns out hotels are great at that part. But Sagar, come back in, please.
Yeah, I want to dig into kind of what you were talking about there, Sriram. We have an immense amount of audience interest, and I can see it in the tech layoffs. I know that was one of your guys' biggest episode over on your podcast. I'm curious for how you guys think that's going to shape the next generation. So Paul Graham famously always talked about, what was it, building companies in the recession in 2008, how that actually was good for innovation. So here we have this lesson of we're watching every major big tech company cut almost 10% of their workforce. Devastating for a lot of people. I'm never going to cheer that on. But of course, look, Twitter, they fired 90% or something of the staff. I'm not going to say my user experience has been fantastic, but the core product does work. And, by all metrics, engagement and all of those things do exist. So if I'm Microsoft, if I'm Zoom, if I'm Google or any of these Amazon, any of these companies, I'm learning a fundamental lesson of hey, actually, I don't need to have some of this. What does that look like though? Whenever you guys at the incubation startup phase, how does it change the way that your founders and the next generation of builders are going to look at these?
Oh man, that has been the conversation in the last couple months. Pretty much every founder we talk to, everyone here, this is the thing at dinner conversations, everywhere else. Part of it is a lot of these big companies grew a lot through the pandemic. We all went remote, we all stayed home, and these companies, grew by 50%, 100%, tripled. It was just, unjustifiable growth in the number of employee count when the bottom line didn't grow. The revenue didn't grow that fast, margins didn't grow that big, and it just really started eating into the baseline of these businesses. And you're seeing the effects of that now. And I think, you're starting to see the 10%-ish kind of layoffs. There's going to be more. I don't think they've even started scratching the surface of how do they actually get more efficient as a business. And part of it is just people and headcount and just cutting that through. I think that's one part of it. Second, we've just collected a lot of cruft in the process. How do we ship things? How do we build things? Who makes decisions? Through the pandemic, I think we've all kind of lost that culture of be scrappy, get things out the door. And I think you're seeing this great reset starting to happen in front of us, where part of it is headcount, part of it is employee processes, cultures, all of that, and flattening out the layers and decision making just being much more streamlined. You're seeing that. And then for founders, I think they're now finally less afraid. Earlier, they had this pressure to go mimic these big companies. Oh, I need a head of sales and a VP of whatever. And now they're actually, I don't. I just need to go sell these products and find people who would use it. And if they're not using it, then I have a problem. I have to go build something better or go pivot my business. And I think a lot of founders are starting to come back to it's the fundamentals that really matter. It all these virtue signaling and titling and all of that stuff, it doesn't really matter. It never moved the needle. It's not going to move the needle now. Big companies are realizing it. We should have never veered away from it. And I think I think net it's healthy for the ecosystem. And the laid off people, we did a whole episode on this too, right? I think it sucks to be laid off. I think we've been there where, in 2008, when we were at Microsoft, they did their first ever layoffs in their 30-year history at that point. And it was brutal. We couldn't see what the end was going to look like. My visa process got affected. It was just crazy all around. But I think at the end of it, you had these people who got laid off go out and start building companies, or they went and joined other startups, and they started figuring out what else they should be using their skill set for. And as much as it sucks to say this, it net it works out. It the good people figure out what else to go build and add value and create in the world.
Yeah, I think Aarti covered the founder side so well. I think the big tech part is way worth examining. There has been a playbook of how to run big tech companies for the last 6-7 years. And I think that's often based on, you have this fundamental business which spits off a lot of money. You have hundreds of millions of users, depending on your category. You're kind of doing well, and you can hire like crazy. Somebody showed me the stats that Adi was pointing out. I think some of these companies have grown 90% in the last 2 years. So when you think about a 10% layoff, they're actually back to 2021 numbers. So just to put perspective, it's not they're back several years. So, but there was kind of a playbook which was often a lot of distractions, lots of title inflation, org inflation, a lot of people trying to climb the internal ranks. No fault of this. That's kind of human incentive. Now, today, you mentioned Twitter and Elon. I probably had connections probably at least 7, 8 high-profile founders and CEOs of late-stage companies who all told me versions of something like this. They said, we've been watching Elon closely. We may not be signing up for all the controversial things. We may not tweet the same things he does, right? But what he's doing is really shifting the Overton window of what is possible with much lesser people. If Twitter could go from 8,000 people to 1,000 people, and to your point, kind of keep working, maybe not everyone would do it the same way, in the same style, or say things that we can debate that. But they're like, I don't know whether I need 100,000 people to run my company, which has maybe 3-4 times Twitter's usage. Like, that's something proportional. So, and I think a lot of folks are now having, I was talking to a very well-known CEO who was like, I went to my exec team and I said, why can't we do what Elon does? And they were like, but we're really like, but forget the style, but we should do this with a lot less. And they're having this really, really hard conversation. So it's really shifted the Overton window in a lot of companies internally. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that impact keep playing out.
Yeah, since we're on the Elon topic, I just love to, obviously, I don't want to get too far down like an unhelpful, crypto decentralization rabbit hole, just because I don't know how prices work. Sagar and I, we're not crypto people, so we can't go deep on it. But something I do want to know is why did decentralized crypto-based blockchain social networks not take off? That's the really interesting, kind of analytical story, because if you think about it, you've had actually kind of let me set this up. You've had a weird situation the past few years. So with Trump getting deplatformed off of Twitter, you had a lot of people on the right basically saying, we don't like the centralized, powerful, tech companies. But that was very, once again, it was a right-wing focused, discourse. If you're center left and to the left, you not only probably liked what Twitter did, but you probably didn't care. With Elon coming into power at Twitter, you had the opposite phenomenon kind of happen. You had a lot of center left to left folks saying, oh man, look at all this centralized power. This is bad, blah, 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 blah. It seems to me that this was the perfect opportunity for someone to say, look, forget ETH, forget, Bitcoin and the prices. At a core level, there's a decentralization centric technology here that can address a lot of these questions. What didn't happen that maybe should have happened? Or is should this be thought of the fact that people tried to do things like Facebook in the late 90s? It just wasn't quite there yet. How should we think about it?
First of all, amazing reference, because I don't know if you read my mind. I've used the exact analogy with Elon multiple times to a lot of other people. And Marshall and I have not talked before this, but I've made the exact same point that with Twitter, all of a sudden there are people on both sides of the spectrum going hey, maybe if we don't agree with the person running this, what happens, which is kind of an interesting shift. So I'll say, just a full disclaimer, I work at a large crypto VC fund, and we actually have multiple investments in decentralized social networks. And I actually think this is going to be one of the, and I'm very biased, but I actually think this is going to be one of the most interesting categories this year and coming years for a few reasons. So first off is, first of all, these words can mean a lot of things to different people. So maybe we just kind of quickly define what these are. So when people think crypto, they think a lot of things. They think tokens, prices, etc. Right? I think of crypto, and I stole this from Chris Dixon, who I work for. There are two things. One is you can call the casino. It's a lot of trading, a lot of prices moving up and down. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about crypto as in the world computer. You run a program, everyone across the world can see what is happening, have access to it verified. And that's what the core of things running on top of something like Ethereum is. Now, we can go super deep on this, but let's say we're treating the world computer. And the heart of decentralized social is, I think, a reaction to two things from social media companies over the last 10 years. So some of us, I think Sagar and I have some private conversation about this, right? Sagar and Crystal and you folks, right? If YouTube, Susan Wojcicki wakes up tomorrow and says I don't like Sagar's thoughts on suits, F that guy, right? And takes you off the platform, or maybe she has a great European coffee experience and Sagar really pisses her off, right? That'll be the end, or that will have a very negative impact on Breaking Point. It won't be the end. Yes. You guys are amazing, but but on the other hand, you have an email audience, but that is yours. Nobody can take it away from you. And that is how the internet used to work, right? The internet used to work where if you had an email audience or if you had a web browser, you could do anything, and nobody, no one team, and Susan's amazing, all these folks are amazing, but no one team of execs sitting in a conference room in Silicon Valley could take that away from you, right? So, and I think the world has shifted. And for the first time in a few years, people are starting to realize, hey, I don't want to get, you can say deplatformed, censored, shadow banned, muted, visibility filtered, deboosted, de-amplified. There's a zillion words for this, right? It's literally the idea is I don't want some set of people, who have control over everything, deciding what I get to say and not say, right? I want to be able to directly reach my audience. So that is one part of it. And I think that's one key value prop to decentralized social, which is, it's actually, I would flip it. It is not you folks having an email list and having access. It is their subscribers having access to you. Yeah. I choose to follow you, right? And nobody should remove that relationship. And I think that's very interesting.
Today you're seeing the top creators like you're all doing this too, which is you're hacking the decentralization by just being on different platforms and being everywhere and owning your audience through email lists, owning your audience on Substack. And like you're seeing this already happen, except that it's not happening on a decentralized platform. You're decentralizing you as a creator by being everywhere.
Yeah. So that, I think you're doing this, and email is probably the best example of this. So that's value prop 1. Value prop 2 is many, many years ago, like, I don't know, like, I'm very old, but when I grew up, right, like you could use email from any number of clients, even today, right? You can use a Gmail app, you can use a mail app. Email is a protocol. Like nobody's really forcing you to use an app. But when you use Instagram, you got to use the Instagram app. And in fact, if you go back through history, a lot of the amazing innovations, for example, say even Twitter, came from stuff that other people built. This is a bit before a lot of people's time, but I'll give you an example. The @tag, the @reply was invented outside Twitter. The hashtag was invented by this guy named Chris Messina, right? Who used it as a phenomenon. The Twitter iOS client was actually acquired because it was the kind of the leading mobile app among many, right? There was URL shorteners like Bitly and a lot of these URL shorteners. So there's an entire ecosystem of things where people could build on top of a central platform. Now, what wound up happening is for a lot of these, and Instagram was similar, a lot of the other books similar. What wound up happening was those things tend to be incompatible with an ad business, which if your business is showing, and by the way, I spent 5 years working on ads. I love the ad business. We can debate that. But if your business is like, when people see me, I'm going to show you something, you're going to have other people show you things without me being in the middle, right? Like you just can't have that. And so over time, a lot of these clients got removed, and it was like, hey, if you want a new Instagram feature, if you want Instagram to support Reels or what, Instagram, Adam Mosseri or somebody sponsored by Hype to build it. That's the way things work, right? Now, decentralized social is not that. Decentralized social basically says, look, anybody can build on this stuff. It is infinitely composable. Now, you can take it in multiple directions. So you can say, one, it gives you sovereignty, right? Mm-hmm. You can say nobody can cancel you. You can use a different client, which has, the people that subscribe to your political beliefs. That's kind of one lens of things. The other lens of things is like, maybe you want a different experience. You want to have only video on your social media, or you want to have only disappearing chat, whatever it is, you can have that experience. And anybody's free to build on it, just like anybody's free to build on email. So these two value props are just kind of, it's a bit of a long speech, but these two value props are very, very important. And I think now we're seeing a bunch of companies, ones I like to talk about, and I'm an investor in this, is a company called Farcaster, which is led by this very long-term crypto founder, a guy named Dan Romero.
We were just on Moment of Zen with him, so listeners have heard from Dan.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So he explains a lot better than I do. But there are others, right? Like there are others like Lens Protocol, that are outside the ecosystem. No, they're all very early, everyone will admit that. And they all have to solve the unique problem of like, hey, is this fun to use for tens of millions, hundreds of million people? That's the game. But we're bullish because I do think, tying this all back, there is no point in time where people are like, hey, maybe I don't want one set of people to control the things I say. And by the way, those things are not just the culture was in the US, right? What if is the Chinese government? What if it's somebody else? Like I want transparency. I want to see what's going on. And so I'm very bullish on decentralized social.
Yep. Real quick,
interesting.
Because this is kind of my standard when I talk to Web3 crypto folks. So I remember, I'm sure you two remember the first time you ever used Facebook. I was at debate camp and at Stanford, and this kid's like, hey, I checked this thing out. Like Facebook had just been opened up to high schoolers. So I signed up. I'm like, this is so much better than MySpace. It's clean. It was incredible. Yeah. I feel as if my skepticism when I hear crypto pitching, you're not pitching crypto, you're describing decentralized social media. I'm not hearing. And once again, like it's a thing for someone to build. So I'm really basically saying this is what builders should be focused on. I think folks are waiting for something positive not just the absence of something. So it's not enough to say, hey, Mark Zuckerberg or Elon or the CCP or like Section 230. That's like the absence of something you don't like.
Right.
What would the two of you see as being, and this could be hypothetical, what would be that additive thing where someone says like, holy crap, it's 2006 again?
I can take a shot. You're 100% right? The appeal for crypto can't be people rejecting censorship. Because I think at the end of the day, that's going to be a very small set of people. It has to be offer something new and fun to a large set of people. And I have a theory. So one of my favorite posts ever about the history of social media companies, and I'm so jealous I didn't write this, is a post called Status as a Service by a guy named Eugene Wei. Highly recommend linking to it in the show notes. And what it basically says is that every social media company has the same path to success, which is something like this. You get a set of high status people, and we get what status means, who are underserved by an existing social media platform to come to you, and they become the core. You kind of create these boundaries around them, and they create a part of something new. By the way, kind of true for countries too. The folks who came over to New England from Europe were not the richest people in Europe, right? But they're pioneers, obviously, the original pioneers. So if you look at this, Facebook, what did they do? Facebook is like, let's get kids in Harvard. Right? Some of the most high status people around, then kids in other Ivy League schools. And they made it very desperate. It was only, it was such a status thing. And by the way, every time something expanded, the existing folks fought so hard to not have it expand. It still happens. Like 5 years ago, by the way, Instagram folks fought to not have it expand from iOS to Android. Very similar to the Harvard kids were like, we can have these Yale kids have this Facebook. We only special to us. We are cool. So, but every single time it is high status people having access to something exclusive. Now, then every single time what also happens, like they have to be underserved by existing platforms. So for example, if you look at TikTok, the breakout star in TikTok was Charli D'Amelio, because Charli D'Amelio was an amazing dancer, highly relatable, and she was underserved by Instagram, whose whole thing was you look amazing in kind of a 2D visual, right? So the meta kind of changed, right? If you look at Snapchat was a counterculture reaction to Facebook being like, you need to have your entire story and narrative of your life on Facebook at all times. So I'm saying, no. The only thing which matters is what happened last 24 hours. And by the way, you cannot post a selfie and we're going to make you look good and give you a social license to do so. So you left a small town, came to New York, and you're reinventing yourself. Nobody needs to know where you went to school. You are now you. And so every one of these platforms basically took a set of people who are underserved, created new social capital, and then we're off to the races. So I think
the other example is Discord, right? Like, and Discord is all about finding that niche set of people who didn't belong in any of these like bigger platforms, but they're like, I want to just talk about crypto. I want to talk about gaming. I want to talk about some very specific sci-fi movie. And they would just start like building out these audiences around it and have moderators come in, and just it becomes so custom. Like if you're a part of some Discords that have these big rabid followings, it's all so customized, right? And they all feel like they're in this community together. They can be comfortable with each other, that they couldn't find that comfort and value anywhere else. Like it's not on Instagram, it's not on Facebook, it's not anywhere else, but they could feel like they were there with friends. And so I think, to your point, every one of these platforms kind of did something that was different and unique and served an audience that was not well served by anybody else.
So what does it mean for crypto, right? Which is kind of the decentralized social media, and we will see, right? But if you look at all these platforms, nobody became big of the feature. It became big because of the people they had. And I think with something like Farcaster, all the smart people in crypto are there. And you're getting smarter people outside crypto. And what if we get some of the smartest, maybe let's take Fast Track aside for a second. Let's look at something like Substack. Substack has become a phenomenon over the last 2 years. How? By taking these people who really had an inbuilt audience voice, but wasn't actually either, they were didn't have a way to write long form pieces and get an audience, or they were underserved by the New York Times or all these large establishments working for. They were like, hey, we're going to take you and give you an audience. So they took these underserved people who had huge social capital and built a platform on them. So I think for crypto, and nobody has done this yet, Farcaster, as interesting as but we will see, is you have to get audience that others aspire to be and want to be close to, who are underserved, and get them over. Which is also interesting because, I actually think the folks who use these platforms are not going to be The Rock, are not going to be Kendall Jenner, not going to be Charli D'Amelio, because they are already super well. They're good. They have, The Rock is great on Instagram. He has like 250 million followers. He doesn't need, a place where all. But I think the young voices, people like you, people like the folks, hopefully in the comments, be like, hey, this is a place where you can build your own brand, your own following. You can be the Charlie D'Amelio of something new, or you can be the Kylie Jenner of something new. That's the appeal. Has it been done yet? No, but I think that's how things will play out.
That's an interesting way to put it. The question around crypto then is how do you, so there's probably a decent amount of this audience who's deeply skeptical of crypto, and you can't really blame them after the 2 years and after SBF. So how would you diagnose what went wrong, I guess, over the last 2 years, and how to come out of it as somebody who works in the crypto space? Or did anything go wrong? Is that a false narrative?
Well, obviously, I think I think I have to come back to the casino versus the computer part. And the reason why, let me kind of answer it in a roundabout way. I sometimes think about crypto as a religion, but there are multiple paths to it. And if you look at the history of crypto, the origin of crypto came from the cypherpunks, right? The libertarians who are like, hey, we want to be self-sovereign. We kind of like reject the idea of fiat currency. We reject the idea of central banking. You folks know, for example, like folks like the bankless people. A lot of these kind of origin of crypto came from that world. Like Satoshi used to hang out on some of these cypherpunk mailing lists, obviously 10, 12 years ago. But over the era, I think different churches evolved and different kinds of people started coming. And if you look at, say, the last 2 years, on the NFT side, it was often creators who are like, hey, I don't want to give the streaming company this share of my proceeds. I want to build a fan base and have direct access to them. And I'm not terribly sure they really kind of put the cypherpunk origins. They were trying to solve a very different use case. So my personal church, by the way, is I spent 8-10 years in these large centralized social media companies, and I saw over time what it means to have one small set of people make decisions, a lot of people, right? And I was a part of it. But now I'm like, okay, there has to be a better way. The internet was not meant to be run by a few people making all the decisions. That's not what got me into tech in the 90s. That's not, without internet technology, Arthi and I wouldn't have met. We met online, right? Mm-hmm. Without the internet, we would be, not be here talking to you folks, right? We wouldn't have anything that we have today. But this is not the internet I signed up for. So my religion on crypto is the global computer. The idea that you can run these things as protocols and not, and not companies, which is what's really interesting. Now, so that's what keeps you bullish. Now, is there been a lot of bad stuff happening, especially by folks in the Bahamas? Absolutely. But that is a casino. And, but I think the answer to that, and we can get into that, it's going to be more regulation. It's going to be, better technology. There's going to be a bunch of stuff in there. But I'm going to do this for many years. So I'm very biased. But I really believe in the global computer part of crypto.
I also think, right before this show started, we were talking about content and tourists. And I think in the last couple of years for crypto, we had a lot of tourists. And there were just people who were like, oh, this looks shiny. I could make cash out a quick buck and just go off and never look at this again. And they were not builders. They were just here to just be on the scene. And we knew they were going to leave. They knew they were going to leave. And now they've left. And I think, as much as it feels like a crypto winter, I think it's good because builders can actually just continue building. And I think you're seeing that, and we talk to all these startups, especially when you look at decentralized infrastructure startups, boring as hell, but those are the things that actually gets things done, right?
Not boring.
I mean, we bought our infra people. This is our bread and butter.
We know on this stuff.
But if we did a show on just ZK proofs, half the people would fall asleep. We would be listening.
It'd be great.
But
but yes,
it's not as cool and glamorous as Hollywood celebrities selling NFTs.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
These are the people building things, and I'm very optimistic about that.
Yeah, but one interesting thing about a Farcaster or some of these Web3 social, zero part of the appeal is you'll make money from it. There's nothing about it which is about the financialization or you'll make capital. It is purely about the dynamics of building an audience, participating in a conversation, all that stuff that goes to social media. I actually think that's a very interesting thing. For example, I think it comes up in for other spaces like gaming too, where the core part of, I think, these apps have to be not the implicit promise of you can trade on this or you can become wealthy. The core part of it, obviously, you can own things and you're sovereign. That's key. But also, if it's a game, it's amazing and it's fun and it looks great. And with social media, it gives you, we can have a long conversation of what social media, but it gives social media. And I actually think it's a very interesting point about Farcaster, which I always say, there is nothing in Farcaster which, if you install it today, says hey, you ever going to make any money. But that's not part of the thing at all. It's going to be like, sign up. There's going to be great people here. You're going to participate. It's going to be a fun time.
So,
okay.
To be fair to, we'll hit some other crypto stuff a bit later, but I want to be fair to the crypto market and also talk about other areas that have struggled that also directly relate to what we all do, the creator economy space. I'm fascinated by this discourse. So a couple useful data points that I should be able to link to. So the Edison research report came out. It's basically the main cataloger or chronicler of how the podcast industry is looking. And after the initial COVID boom, aka you've got your Zoom, you got your mic that came through Amazon, and you just wanted to launch something and put it on Anchor, the creation of new podcasts has really collapsed in the past year. A lot of shows are quote unquote pod fading. It's where you kind of post a lot, then you stop posting. Basically, the underlying reality here is that it's a difficult space. A lot of companies that were founded on this idea that there was this broad, this is kind of me quoting Lee Jin here, another post that she wrote, the Harvard Business Review, I'll put in the show notes. She wrote this great piece, which is the dream is this creator middle class. It's not, you don't have to make a lot of money by having a million Mr. Beasts. Actually, you could build a whole economy based on someone making 50, 60, 70, 80, maybe even $30,000. Those just didn't really happen as much. So would love to hear from the two of you a couple different directions. So what's it been like to be a creator during the boom and then the correction? And then two, just what are your big thoughts about the creator economy and podcasting as a whole as the industry itself has kind of gone through those narrative shifts?
Yeah, both great questions. I think we both are very much in the thick of it now. But when we started over 2 years ago, we didn't start out to be creators. Our journey was this, right? We discovered Clubhouse. Our common friend Mark Andreessen was like, you should get on this platform, and sent us an invite when it was, everybody had 3 invites to send out. And we were like, okay, we should go check it out. Thick of the pandemic, I think November, December 2020, it's kind of when we started out being like, well, we should kind of host these virtual conversations on it. It's audio only, you don't have to get dressed up. There's no camera, just pick up the phone, talk into it, and there's your room and there's your conversation. And that's kind of how our show started. And then we started doing these shows 3-4 days a week because we had nothing better to do. We're not meeting anyone, we're not going anywhere, so might as well just do this. So through the pandemic, this was something that we just really took part in every evening. And then our show blew up because Elon Musk came on the show, Mark Zuckerberg came on the show, and then everyone's like, who the hell are these two? They're not creators. Why are they here? And so for us, Clubhouse was great as a platform because we would have never done this if this was the initial entry into content creation. And I'm saying all this because, since then we've moved on to YouTube, done video. I think on video now we started last June, July. So it's about 35-ish episodes in. And it's a very different ball game. And I think when people start creating content, I think they underestimate how much effort goes into creating content. And it's not just being in front of the camera and saying the right things and just that part, recording it. It's all the downstream work. It's about editing. It's about what you're cutting out. Or if you're interviewing a guest, do they have a good time? Are you framing the right conversation? Are you talking about the timely current topics? Are you the social media side of things? Are you doing a Substack? All the downstream stuff that we all know about. And that's the game. It's a very unsexy game that, people don't talk about when what it takes to become a creator, because all they see is the polished, finished project, the product out there. And so I think people give up. It's just, most people don't want to go beyond the first, 8-10 episodes even. And the ones who make it after that, I think make it to 20 or so. There is a huge fall off after the 20 episodes. And it's just really hard. And I think that's kind of where we came from. If it hadn't been for this audio platform easing us into this, we probably wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I spoke to so many people. I think so right. This is so hard. By the way, as a guest, we're having a great time here.
I know.
Yeah,
I was gonna say the Peter Griffin Family Guy joke. She said it. Oh, she said it. The good time.
What a work that reference it. Right? Good time. And that sounds somehow dirty. Maybe that's not that. But okay.
Don't worry about it.
So I think we've spoken to so many people who were very accomplished in their domain. They were an Instagram influencer or often a VC or a CEO, and they were like, I'm going to do a podcast, right? You do 5 episodes, right? You get 10 views, right? And you get like your colleague, your VP being like, great episode, and nobody says anything. And you're like, gosh, this is hard, right?
Or yeah, it's the worst when that one episode when you thought you did great and then nobody talks about it and there are no comments, no views, and you're like, God damn it. Like I had such a great conversation. Why didn't you like reciprocate this?
Can you tell you the story which hurt me the most when we were doing content? Aarti's parents, who are delightful, live in Chennai, India, right? Are amazing, amazing people. Not probably the folks who subscribe to podcasts like these, but they listen to us, right? Because I'm the son-in-law, she's daughter. And one time they were
they're tough love.
They're
parents.
tough love, very engaged Indian stereotype. One time they were like, they said, I was watching one of your live streams and it had 3 viewers. And I didn't want to close the tab because I didn't want it to go down to 2. So I left it open. And I will say,
the content was not great, but I didn't have the heart to close it. But you guys did better.
Yeah. So I would say, as somebody, who's
parents who are listening, don't say this. Is the actual takeaway.
I would say, as a son-in-law, Indian son-in-law who's supposed to be successful in doing things, to hear your mother-in-law say like, I didn't want to close the tab.
Oh, but what's worse was she was like, there's this other cooking show that we watch on YouTube. That guy has 2 million subs. He does great content. He's so funny, this guy. You should like try and see what he does and
watch
learn
the show.
from that.
It's like this sweet old lady with this janky camera in her kitchen who has 2 million subs. And I'm like, what the F is going on? So anyway,
I get it.
Yeah. It's hard, right? The point is it's hard. And I think most people can't get past that, right? It's an art, it's a part, and 90% of it, I think credit to you folks, Sagar, so many folks is great. But I think if you figure it out, that you can become a phenomenon. I'll give you 2 examples. Lex Friedman, Andrew Huberman. I think Sagar, Crystal, you folks definitely in there. I think without COVID, it would have been really hard for you to be catapulted all the way to the top, right? Because I think somebody like Rogan already had a platform, started blowing up through COVID because people had more free time to listen. But Huberman was purely
after 10 years of podcasting.
Yeah.
Like that's the important part of the Rogan story.
Right? But Huberman blew up through COVID because people had time, and Huberman's fantastic, right? He has a lot of life experience. He's super, authentic, academically rigorous, helpful. Doesn't treat his audience like idiots. So he does so many things amazingly well. But I think, so I think if you can crack it on the other side, I will say one point though, I do think there is a reckoning happening where a lot of folks are like, hey, we can make a business from this, right? Or finding out that it's really hard. Yeah. Because one thing and I think the common, and I think I want to give credit to Colin and Samir, who are amazing, published press, go subscribe to the channel, they're amazing people. They've taught me a lot about content creators. They were like, when you're a creator, you do one thing really well. You're amazing at putting together great videos, hosting great conversations, but then building a business is a whole other thing. You need to run a merch shop, right? Or maybe you need to get people to come to your class where you teach something, but you don't want to teach something. You want to just put out like banger videos, or you want to like do a live event, but that's not your modality either. And I think for a lot of folks, they were like, well, I'm good at this thing. I love doing it every single day. I love doing TikTok dances, or I love doing this interview. Power to you, that's great. But now to make money, I have to do this whole other thing over here. And that's not natural to me. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. And I think that's actually a lot of the reckoning which is happening. But I actually think, Sagar, you've been living this a lot longer than I have. You probably have a much better take than I do.
Yeah, no, I actually completely agree. I lived through the same thing, initial Substack, after we launched our Supercast, I had friends reach out to me and be like, hey, I think I could do this. And I'm like, maybe don't. It's like, or it's one of those where I'm like, hey, that's a great idea, but what's your plan? Like, what's your value add? People see the Realignment Supercast or Breaking Points, but like, there's a hell of a lot of hours of thought that goes into how we think about it and what we're actually adding and what people are getting and the consistency and the realism. And then how we, take those dollars and spend them. And, we spend time, Marshall and I, checking in with people being like, hey, are you liking the product? Like, I spend a lot of time always thinking about like, look, some lady out there gave me $10 a month. And like, I gotta make sure that this lady feels appreciated every day. And people cancel. And, then you got to be like, okay, well, what's the legitimate one versus like, it's like, okay, just go away, and it's like, well, how do you balance that? And then even in terms of the conception of the business itself, that's actually the number one mistake that I see people make. I just filmed a fitness video today at my gym. It's a good example. And there's a guy there. He's got like 14,000 followers, and he's young, and he's one of those. He's like, this is gonna be it, man. Like, this is how I'm gonna make it. And I was trying to explain to him, I'm like, dude, I know people with 300,000 followers who make no money. And he's like, oh, how? He's like, how is that possible? I said, listen, fitness, highly commoditized. What is the actual? He's like, yeah, but I could sell supplements or whatever with my link. I'm like, dude, you're going to pull like 5 cents.
Another commodity
on an
product,
affiliate,
by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
this way is the unique way,
right.
like.
And I was trying to explain, I'm like, if you want to make any real money in this game, there are people out there, for example, who probably have 5,000 followers who are making 15 times with the guy with 300,000 followers because he got a better business. Or, those 5,000 are niched in and they're bought in totally to the vision, and they'll buy a $5,000 a year fitness, package one-on-one. That's how you can make real money. But in his head, like, that did not compute. And I think that's the biggest, that's the biggest gap. What's up?
Do you continue to tell them that, like, when you talk to these folks, part of me is like, oh my God, you're so naive, the battle scars that you're going to have through this journey, dude, like, don't even. And then the part of me is like, don't be cynical, like, let them go.
Yeah, you're right.
Let them try it. How do you figure out what the balance is?
So I'm being cynical here. In terms of what I said, hey, I'm glad you're having a good time.
No, but that's important. That's more substantive than it sounds.
Right. Right. I was like, hey, I'm really glad that you're having a good time. Here are some warnings. Here are some things to think about. And that's it. And I think that's actually, 9 out of 10 times I have a lot of friends who are in the space. 2 months later, they'll be like, yeah, you were right. And I was like, yeah, I know, but it's okay. It's okay.
So, for example, just like a podcast, right? Like, kind of starting. Podcasts are hard. So, every once in a while I say YouTube comment, which is like, this podcast is boring. I'm like, okay. So, for example, both of us, we are friends. We know each other pretty well. Sagar and I have known each other for quite a while. This took 3 months to schedule, right?
Yeah.
Like, you cancel once, we cancel once. We have all that stuff going on. Second, like, that's actually the best scenario because we all know each other, we trust each other, we have a hopefully a fun dynamic. Comments, let us. But often you're like, well, I want to get this guest, but they don't want to come on. They're hard to schedule, or you get this very famous person you need to bring on, but you hate that person. But you're like, all right, well, maybe this person is going to bring you views, and that's the only thing that matters. And and all of a sudden we see the same person doing like 5 different podcasts. You also be like, well, I need to do this thing which is applicable to my audience, but also that person wants to talk about that, and they don't want to talk about this, and you're trying to square the circle. We once had this PR person, this has happened a while ago, who took 5 calls with us to basically say, you cannot talk about this person's dating history. Let folks kind of speculate who the person was. And we're like, we have no interest in it. So
that's half of Hollywood.
What?
And also you're trying to kind of like, well, what is the YouTube algorithm, right? Like, so for example, right, if you look at Andrew Schultz, like Schultz does an amazing job. Like, I'm going to talk about the banger thing in the zeitgeist right now, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it is J-Lo and Ben Affleck at the Grammys. I'm going to talk about that because YouTube algorithm is going to pop me up. So does this mean like we need to mention, pick your example, so all these things going on at the heart of video, like, let's just have a fun conversation. Like, is this going to be interesting? Am I because if you're not having fun, you just burn out. Exactly. This is where Aarti really comes in handy. Aarti has so much more of a work ethic than I do. I'm a lazy, mofo. And Aarti is
Sriram's the visionary, and I'm the one who does the work.
He's the idea guy.
Yeah.
Aarti, who's like, we need to do this. We need to get this out there. And she's the one looking at the metrics. She's the one be like, hey, have you followed up with this person? And otherwise, I'm like, I give up. Like, the people in the comments didn't like me, right? This sucks. And she's like, no, we're going to keep doing it. Anyway, so folks in the comments, give up. Props to Sagar and Marshall. This stuff is picking up.
I'm not even going to read them. So
this is a couple of thoughts here, because this should be more discussion based anyway, since we know each other. So number one, I think the key thing to what someone should take away from here is I got so frustrated with how ideological a lot of the framings of everything we're talking about became. And I kind of even mean in a really political sense. Like, Sagar, you and I know a bunch of creator types who are in our category. People who are in DC and New York usually, these are people you were talking about coming to you who are like, you're right. Like, screw having a boss. Like, screw media companies. Like, on my own, I'm independent, and didn't think really analytically about like, okay, so I'm this is me. This is what I struggle with personally. I'm a great interviewer. I'm so good at it. I could do it for hours and hours and hours and hours. I'm not great at the business operation stuff. It's like, no, I probably should look into an Adderall prescription if I want to really like be hitting the right notes there. So without performance enhancement, I just can't do it at the same level. So when I'm thinking about like, do I want to be making the majority of my living off of the realignment? I shouldn't be thinking, man, like the idea of a boss does suck. And I am an independent critic. I should actually be thinking, no, dude, what do you do 6 months from now when you want to buy a house and you have a mortgage? And the boss looks a lot better. This goes to like another point that I'd like to talk about too, which is that like, this doesn't get mentioned enough in the tech circles because I think it's uncomfortable, but like, let's talk about the New York Times. I think the New York Times as a business story is one of the most interesting business stories of all time. So think about the 2008 metaphor. We're talking about 2008, the financial crisis. New York Times has to be sold to like a Mexican billionaire. They're laying everybody off. They have all these problems. You have all these new companies like HuffPost, BuzzFeed, Mike. I can't even name all these places because they're all Vice. They're coming in saying that like, look at the legacy companies. The New York Times is the hotel and the taxi company of the media space. Almost all of those like digital new media companies basically flamed out. The New York Times is doing better than ever. I would love to hear your articulation of what those 10 to 12 years looked like and how you kind of see this play out. Because the thing that I'm really interested in thinking about is like, the New York Times leaned into the fact that there's kind of two different categories of media moving forward. Mine would be, there's like the New York Yankees, which is what the Times is, which is like, look, I'm going to pay $15 a month. I'm just going to get all these people. And then the other side of the table is individual creators. So like, I love tech. I love culture. I'm going to trust like RT and Shriram. That's what I'm going to basically do. If you're just a digital media brand, so like you don't have the ability to hire the Yankees, but you also can't keep a stable of like really impressive creators, you're just kind of stuck with nothing. You're stuck without like either the advantages of a brand, nor do you have the advantages of being like a trusted individual voice. So it just seems like they got caught there. But like, I mean, yeah, what I'm really hearing is that BuzzFeed should have been investing in individual creators in 2015. If like BuzzFeed had put together a Vine or TikTok house, that would have been really interesting as an alternate universe. But like, how do you guys think about this dynamic?
I look at it as, mine is a very tech focused kind of, that's the lens that I'm coming from, right? And there is a reason why, at least from like the tech space, people are trusting these big media publications a lot lesser. We understand what's going on with respect to like, if you talk about layoffs or if you talk about like the internal workings of an Uber or whatever, we know what like the reality is versus what is being written. And you can kind of see the delta there. And then I think everybody goes in like, well, if there is a gap here, what else are they getting incorrectly there kind of thing. I also think I'm very biased about this, so big caveat there, but it's hard to build things and be a founder. If you have all the odds stacked up against you, the last thing you want is like some media publication just dumping on you all the time. And I think it's really hard to look. A lot of tech deserves criticism for a bunch of things, right? And a lot of these have been covered. I'm not going to go into details, but when they start picking on like some really tiny 2-person founder startup trying to go build something and being like, look at those people don't deserve to exist. That's kind of when it really hurts, where you're like, well, I don't trust you guys because I just don't think, I think you have a very cynical view of how technology works. And I know this is a point where Shriram and I don't often agree on. So my view is like, this is why people are thinking about decentralization when it comes to technology. This is why people are thinking about, I should just get my news and stories and everything from everybody else. Like I am going to the grassroots. I'm going to subscribe to tech podcasts. I am going to get information from the source because the intermediary here is not giving me the full clear picture. And so I'm in that camp. And I don't know if this is going to be a long-standing thing, but right now when I look at like coverage of news, especially like technology news about like startups and founders, it's just not there. It's like, God damn it, just let them build stuff. Like, sure, it might not work out. We all know it might not work out. Every 70% of startups fail. We know that. Like, you don't need like another person to come in and say that.
Yeah. Aarti is very, very, has strong views on this topic. I think I agree. But I think on the new media companies, maybe it's worth examining why did a lot of them not work out, as maybe if you went back to 2014, 2015, every one of them was seen as a replacer, the replacement for the NBCs of the world. I'm a big believer in a lot of things in life and technology, especially that of the barbell effect, where you either have things at two ends of the spectrum, and big and small, individual, large, new and old, and things in the middle, you are doomed.
Yes.
And that's a pattern that I think continues to play out in many, many things in life. And
Okay.
the reason why I think in tech is tech especially has this complex system dynamic where things start compounding, and once things start compounding, you can't stop them, and they tend to wind up at the edges. And what this means is a lot of these new media companies, where neither a 100-year-old institution, Lindy, right, which had the brand, which had like the history to kind of draw upon the institutional credibility, and where neither the individuals, right, like kind of the folks are like, hey, I am connecting to, say, like Ben Smith. I'm not connecting to BuzzFeed. Right, I'm connecting to Sagar. I'm not connecting to
The Hill. No, that's exactly what happened. It's Sagar, not the Hill.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what these companies were, I think about them as they were kind of like trading firms. A lot of trading firms were like, you invent a new trading strategy and you have an edge. You're like, well, I found this new piece of data which lets us get an edge. They were doing the same, but for social media algorithms, right? They were like, we have an edge, right? Maybe it's we autoplay this video and we cut this together, and you maybe tie a bunch of strings around, a pumpkin, like whatever it is. We have an edge, and and that's how we get our audience, we get our views. The challenge is that's a great strategy, but you have to continue sustaining the edge. If you're a trading firm, those edges get equalized out by the market, right? Other smart people come in. You have to keep finding new edges, or you got to find something that nobody can compete with, right? Things that nobody can compete with, Sagar being Sagar, right? Hopefully, Aarti and me being Aarti and me. Things that people can compete with, you having an understanding the metrics of social media algorithm, because there's going to be TikTok, there's going to be something else, and you can't keep up. And I think a lot of folks had two issues. One, they wound up in the middle. Right. Two, as they kind of raised a lot of capital, etc., they kind of got really distracted with a lot of internal issues, often like culture issues. And somewhere in there, they were like, well, our real key asset is our talent. And how do you kind of use that? How do you kind of like keep them Lindy or build a long-term brand? They kind of all got caught in the middle.
That's a great way of putting it. I actually love that, because I lived also through that. Whenever I started out in tabloid media, it was all Facebook. I mean, everything was just geared towards the Facebook algorithm. And then a Facebook single change will nuke 20% of your rev overnight.
They killed companies. Entire companies were literally killed in one night.
And I mean, some people should have woken up to that. I was young enough, and I was like a junior employee that I was like, yeah, I don't think this is the way you want to build a business. But not enough people did. That's a good segue though to ChatGPT. That's something you and I have been talking about, Sriram. We've been talking about that with respect to education. And just side note, I've told you this privately. Marshall, I told you this too. The amount of user interest in ChatGPT at just an organic level is astounding relative to the amount of media coverage that it gets. I don't know why they're not doing it. In terms of our YouTube search data at Breaking Points, it's literally number one. It's been number one for like 2 months. And the segments that we do about ChatGPT and education, about cheating, we talked about it with Rogan, about a return to more oral education, about how it's going to change a lot of those facets of our society. The interest and the enthusiasm, something I haven't seen on tech in a long time. So what do you guys think? Like education aside, I mean, we could talk about that too if you want, but what frontier is this? What does it even represent in tech, and how are people thinking about it? What are the lessons that are being taken away?
I think, I'm biased, but I think AI, LLMs, which is what ChatGPT is, and crypto are probably the two most interesting things in technology for a very long time. And they could be as foundational as the iPhone or maybe the invention of the original internet. Because for the first time, you have a way to process really, really large pieces of data and get something which kind of looks like understanding, and we can have like long discussion like what it actually means on top of it. Now, I think this is going to be foundational on a bunch of, it's going to be transformative in a bunch of ways. First is, and for anybody who's used ChatGPT, you can immediately find out, there's a whole class of companies and jobs which are going to be totally defined, right? Like, for example, the Super Bowl, we are shooting this right before the Super Bowl, this is weekend. There's even a whole entire class of like content companies which are like, we just answer the question, like, what time is the Super Bowl? And that's kind of like a whole thing, or a much deeper version. All this stuff is going to be gone with ChatGPT, right? And much more deeper versions of that, because they can just summarize and answer that for you. So if your company is producing content which somebody can, send like a first year B school student and summarize off the internet, like, you're going to be in trouble. Like, that's number one. I think this also holds true personally, right? Like if you're in a role which somebody can spend 12 hours on the internet and summarize, and that's the thing that you're doing, I think you're probably going for a hard time too, and it's hard to tell which sectors, like these things are often hard to predict in the short term what sequence they'll go in, but in the long run, like things which involve summarization, basic level of understanding, marketing copy. There's been a lot of copywriting, content production. Like we don't prepare for podcasts. Aarti had a great idea where she asked for ChatGPT for questions to ask people.
That's smart.
It gives me a good baseline to start off, because I know what like the lowest common denominator set of questions look like, and then I can like keep adding on to it. And it's really like it's a shortcut on my phone, ChatGPT, and it's like I kind of use it now way more than Google, because it just gives me a ton of information very quickly. But the thing I love about it is it has memory. Like it can take off of like the previous sentences, stuff that okay, based on this, okay, ignore that I said that, but since you said this, what about this other question? And it's able to like just take that from memory and just course correct and adjust and pull in. And it's not always accurate. Yes, it's like buggy. We get it. And I also think it's like, there's a lot of complaints about like, well, the copy isn't great, whatever, but it's amazing. It's amazing. This is like something that, you could have never ever predicted even like 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
And here's my slightly provocative theory. I think this could fundamentally break or change the way the internet works. And here's why, right? For the last 20 years, the foundational sort of, and by the way, this is not original. This comes from Chris Dixon, who I work with a lot too. The way the internet works, something like this. You produce a lot of content online. You go to Google, you search for something. Google sends you traffic with 10 blue links. You show ads against it. You make money. Google makes money. That's the deal. That's the deal the internet has, right? Like, so, every content company, that's kind of the core mechanic it works. ChatGPT, not linking out to anybody, right? And so there's a whole set of questions. I think, we've kind of seen these conversations happening with artists, right? That's super important, creators, that's kind of one part of it. But imagine a world where, any one of your previous employers, The Hill, HuffPo, any one of these folks, or any content company, no longer has people being sent traffic.
That's huge.
Getting traffic to, right? So it kind of sort of changes the way the internet has worked. Where like, hey, you know what? I read you, and it's kind of the equivalent of having an intern kind of summarize something and write up a doc. Well, what does it mean? So I think you might need a fundamentally new business model. Google's probably going to respond to this, and they're going to probably make it better over time. So I think this is going to be super interesting, because for the first time, we have to change the way, potentially, like, these things are hard to predict short term, but long term, they're easy to predict. Change the way the internet works. I think,
and it's the same with LLMs is one part of it, but I think the other part, which is like images and stable diffusion and Midjourney and all these tools, you're looking at those going, now you don't need Photoshop. You can kind of sort of like visualize what you have in mind and kind of like put in prompts and think about it and like spit out content. And it might not be the content that you want to like go publish. And I think it has a lot of consequences for what does it mean for attribution and artists and all of that stuff. But if you want to quickly mock something and build out something and spit out like a prototype image or video, whatever, like now you have tools to do it. Like everyone can be a really effective, 80% creator. Like the last 20% of like being perfect, I think there's still a bunch of work to go do there. But it just I'm really terrible at design stuff. And now I don't have to touch Photoshop. I can just like say, I'm thinking of this with this, but this style and this image and this woman here and whatever. And it just like spits it out. And it's so powerful.
Which service do you use for that?
Stable Diffusion.
Okay.
Stable Diffusion. I should check that out.
Yeah.
Just one thing, because I actually want to highlight exactly what you're saying, Sriram. I asked ChatGPT to like write me a recipe. And immediately I thought what you were saying. I was like, wait, what about all those recipe blogs? Whenever you Google and you're like, best recipe for chicken tikka masala. Okay, let's put that one out there.
Well, let's all of you send Sagar some chicken tikka masala recipes. But actually, can I make a crypto point here? I actually think this is
no, Sriram, you can't. That was in the other section of the episode. No.
Crypto's foundation. Actually, this is where crypto is super interesting, I think, because one thing crypto does really well is deal with things like, hey, how do we, route attribution and credit in a way that things can be verified? Now, lots of interesting problems to be solved here, but you can imagine a future world, and this is like really Chris Dixon's idea in a lot of ways, where anything that you do, you produce content of value, You stick that content in this marketplace in the sky. You say, this is how much I want to be paid for it. And then when the AI trains off it, it finds a way to then route money to you based on how much it is used. And the amazing thing about this is then you can build incentive structures. Like, something like ChatGPT, be like, hey, you know what? We don't have enough chicken tikka masala recipes in there, right? Folks, if you can kind of make some mean stuff in the kitchen, get in there, and we're willing to pay you even more because we know users are kind of searching for this. And I think this could be very interesting application for crypto. But I think Aarti made a profound point. I think people are sometimes negative on ChatGPT. The Steve Jobs has this amazing quote about like computers being a bicycle for the mind. And ChatGPT, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, a lot of these companies, DALL-E, out there are really these amazing bicycles for artists. I was talking to a person who is working on one of the most popular TV shows out there right now, something that all of you have probably seen and watched, and they have a new season coming out. And all of the pre-visualization work they're doing for the new season is purely, I don't want to say which one, but using one of these companies, right? And it's like, oh, because instead of now having a graphical artist, like for example, let's make up something, right? I want to have Sagar in a 16th century samurai costume, but in space, right?
Right. So we have to mock that up.
Yeah. You get an artist and they kind of spin up Unity or Maya and a bunch of stuff and you do something. Now we're like, you literally can go type in something and you get something which is you can't use in production. Kind of like 50%. It could be a great way to brainstorm and tell a story of samurai saga in space. And so I've been seeing it be used everywhere. And I'm actually a big fan of technology enabling new creativity. Like if you go back 100 years, right, when gramophones were first invented, there's this huge outcry. People like, oh my God, this would mean people won't sing on their porches. Like people are no longer going to hang around. This will be the end of human civilization. Turns out that, well, that's not really true. We get some banger songs at the other end of the gramophone.
Yeah, I think a lot of these tools are going to replace what we use today for prototyping. I think you're already seeing that and it's going to happen. A lot of these tools are going to who are the next set of creators? What does creativity even mean? I think we're going to have all of those conversations. This is going to slip into movies, TV shows, fully AI generated movie content or video content. Like, what is that going to look like? There's going to be a lot of downstream stuff you have to go figure out on monetization, attribution, all of that stuff. But I think, and then you have the ethics part of it, right? Like you have the AI ethics and there's this whole conversation around that. Normal people don't give a shit. Like they don't care about that stuff. They just want to pull up ChatGPT, type out stuff, spit out things. And, I saw this whole Twitter thread and I got interested and I did this too. It's like, my weight is this. I want to get to this weight and have this much muscle mass. And tell me what I should be eating, put me on a diet and tell me what I should be working out through the week. And it just does it. And it's like, oh, well, this number to this number, this is your BMI, this is what you need to do. So, hey, you need to do some strength training and this is your program. And it just spits out the whole thing. Yeah. Normal people don't care about the ethics of all of this stuff and the morality behind it. They just want a tool that works and just gives you the thing.
But I'm not sure. I want to push back on that real quick.
I want to push back too.
Yeah. So let me just top off, which is it won't be very unfair here. They don't care now because they're not thinking about it literally. I think it's dangerous to say, and not dangerous, right? Because the stakes aren't that high. It depends on your industry. I think right now consumers don't care, but just as you see organic food, there's always meat and kind of hours pushed back against fake meat, all those different things. I don't think we could predict what social movements are going to come about. Where I think you are going to have some version, especially probably in the 2030s, of return to tradition, but unironically with creators. And the other thing too, to just tie it into the creator conversation we had earlier, this is also where the creator middle class thing is very fascinating, because maybe it's not that every single creator is going to make all this money, but it's that if you run a food blog, Sagar, to your point about I used to go to a food blog. Well, if you're running a food blog now, then you have to kind of behave like a creator. You have to have a good, compelling Instagram presence. You have to be it's because the thing is I think about this with I don't use TikTok, so I'm an unironic Reels user. I kind of have relationships with the people who I scroll through. I'm oh, this person moved to LA. They're not in New York anymore. Yeah, and Olivia, my fiance, we're talking. it wasn't working out for her, so she had to move. So that's just a critical
away
thing.
From that. It's not mutually exclusive. You want information that is Googleable and you get it, and that's it. You don't think about a relationship with Google. It's just a search result. And I think it's a very similar thing. And I think all the AI ethics stuff, like nobody can explain to me what AI ethics really means. It's all just like some
I
woke
think often
nonsense.
AI ethics, and it's going to be very spicy. AI ethics often means like I don't agree with you, and I am, and I actually want to disagree with Aarti on something, which I think that the fact that people don't care about the politics, the culture of it. I do think they will care because it'll be downstream. Have you folks seen Dan in the ChatGPT context? You know what Dan is?
Yeah.
Okay, so this might be an interesting thing to go Google for people. So a bunch of people on Reddit try to find a way to basically hack ChatGPT. And Dan is basically, do anything now. And it's sort of this think of it just like, somebody kind of like root your iPhone where you can run code that it's not supposed to.
Oh, it's like jailbreak.
Yeah. Like jailbreaking. It does that in a spiritual way for ChatGPT. So ChatGPT has all these rules. It can't talk about certain topics. It can't talk about certain things. He'll refuse to. And Dan is basically a jailbreak for ChatGPT, where a bunch of Redditors, instead of this amazing internet way of figuring out ways around rules, where like, well, you type this in and you can get ChatGPT to do anything you want. And I don't even say what you can get things to do, but there's a bunch of interesting, spicy examples online for folks to find. And I think that what's interesting is, well, what does this mean for the morality, the values? Like, for example, like, we have a lot of friends in India. Do they get to say, what their value should be when they use their version of ChatGPT? Would the Chinese government be happy with, what some LLM runs? I think there's going to be all these interesting questions, and I don't want to kind of make this yet another thing about like who makes the policies for stuff we run, but I do think it's going to be a very crucial part of all of this.
Yeah, go ahead, Aarti. Yeah.
I feel like we're like overthinking this all so much. I just don't like, at the end of the day, what is the thing that you wanted to do? You wanted to help you get your stuff done faster. You wanted to get information to you quicker. Like that is like, I think we're like overthinking all this like morality, culture, all of that stuff. You look at like, you go to the DMV, you have like forms to go fill out, or any place where you have this like zillion text boxes and fields that you want to fill out. You know how like when you look at that form, you're like, I don't want to do this today. You can solve that. Like this problem gets solved. It's not a thing anymore. Turns out that we should never be in this business of filling out these like insane forms. There are systems, code that you can write that just pulls in information and fill it out for you and figure out all of that stuff. Why wouldn't you use it? Yeah. Like, what is this whole this thing about?
I think this has been Aarti and I disagree. It's interesting. I actually think it's important because, for example, as video creators, there are phrases that if you say,
it's
bad things happen to you. I don't want to say them. Anything to happen in the events of the last 2 years, anything that happened with certain former administrations, you get demonetized or the algorithm might do things to you. And we all kind of like, well, we can't even talk about it. We can't even refer to it because it's like, it's like, it's sort of like the Voldemort. You can't say this name. And the debate is really not about.
Sagar was going to say something.
Sorry. Okay,
no. I was saying, to me, this is one of those things where you're right, Aarti. Most people don't give a shit, and they're never going to. That said, it will impact enough culturally relevant things that, as Sriram is pointing to, it will then become downstream of that. So I know this from YouTube. 99.9% of people on YouTube don't have to deal with any of the problems that I have to deal with because you're doing like toy unboxing. That said, a lot of people do care that political creators like myself have to walk all these crazy lines whenever it comes to YouTube. So it's not a problem for most people who use YouTube, but it was one of those that became a problem in a very, very important small d democratic way that then people have to care about. So I would square the circle to say, you're right. Look, the vast majority of people who are encountering this, it's not going to matter. The vast majority of censorship only disproportionately impacts people exactly who are in my business. But I know people who work in the toy unboxing space or whatever, to give an example, they care a lot about this because they've also seen small, tiny examples that have bled into their realms. And then they see how, in this case, how it could then bleed over to that. And then, people are, civically minded in some case. So like civics is one of those things where, it's hard to define, it's hard to even think about, but people do care about how it's shaping us. That's how I would square what you guys are talking about. But actually, Marshall's got to go. I know, because he has another recording, and I know you guys are busy as well. But I just want to say I love this conversation. I really had a good time with you guys, and I'm glad that we could finally make it to work. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
He said the words.
Yeah.
Can you guys shout out all the channels, the places can find you?
Yeah, where can everybody find you?
Yeah.
We are Aarti and Shriram's Good Time Show on YouTube, and Aarti R. Shriram K on Twitter and Instagram and everywhere else.
On Forecaster, and aartiandshriram.com. Subscribe, like, high
Subscribe,
five.
like, guys. Links will be down to all of those.
All the 2000s Facebook things.
Oh yeah, poke. There you go. Links to everything down in the description, show notes, etc. Follow these. They're some of the good ones. So thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.